for attending our HADRBC webinar presentation. My name is Ellie Barton Harding, and I will be presenting our webinar today. During the presentation, all of your phones have now been placed on mute to eliminate that background noise. I will stop periodically to answer any questions, and of course you can always use that chat feature in your GoToMeeting session to submit any questions during your webinar presentation. To utilize that function, you click on the chat panel in the control panel, enter a chat in the provided field, and then click send. So in today's webinar, we're going to be looking at the efforts taken to ensure business continuity for CU Northwest and then by extension, the business of our credit unions. So in our presentation, we have three areas of focus. First of all, there is the disaster recovery plan, and that is focused on getting the technical infrastructure up and running. We have our business continuity plan, which is focused on keeping the business operational. And then, of course, the high availability plan, which is focused on 100% operational. And just like the wheels of the cog that you see on the screen, all three of these areas are interlinked. So today, our objective is really four-part. We want to convey and understand the basic details about high availability. We want to look at the basic details of the disaster recovery as well as our business recovery. And in doing so, we'll understand the rationale behind the testing and more specifically, what is being tested. So first thing we want to do is look at and explain some of the acronyms and the verbiage that's used. Like the acronym as we see on the screen, HA stands for high availability. And that refers to a system that is continuously operational for a desirably long period of time. The availability of the system can be measured relative to 100% or never failing. So how does this happen? To explain very simplistically, the data is replicated from our existing production server to an HA or an alternate server. And this happens in real time with no data loss. And so why is it done? Because of a failure of existing production server, the roles can then be switched in between the production server and the HA or the alternate server. And this results in a flip-flop of servers. The HA server now becomes the production server for an indefinite period of time. So now we want to look at the DR part of it, or the disaster recovery. So this is the area of security planning that deals with protecting an organization from the events of what we'll explain as significant events. So how do we protect the organization? So with, of course, the HA or the high availability rollover process that we just identified. And then significant events are anything that puts the organization at risk. They can be acts of nature, such as an earthquake, tornado, hurricane, cyber attacks, terrorist attacks, equipment failures. And then we have the BC, or the business continuity piece of the equation. BC is described as a defined set of planning and preparation that's intended to ensure the continuation of an organization's critical business functions. The business continuity is activated again with the HA or the high availability process. So for CU Northwest, these would be the additional steps that are actually outlined in our own business continuity plan. And CU Northwest Business Continuity Plan can be found on our website. It's at www.cunorthwest.com. You would click on the What We Do link in that orange reference bar. and then click on Disaster Recovery and Audits. And the link to the Business Continuity Plan is under CU Northwest DR Public. Open it up, and then there's the entire document. So by enlisting this Business Continuity Plan, this ensures our organization and yours will continue to operate despite any serious incidents or disasters, or that operations will be reinstated in a reasonably short amount of time. So now, are there any questions at this time from anyone on any of the information that we've gone over so far? So we are trying to keep this as a, I want to say, keep the high-tech verbiage out of this presentation and just cut it down to the very basics. This is what it is, and this is how we do it. Now, I do have a question that came in. Are the slides going to be available? They certainly are. I'm going to have, we actually record our presentations. I will have Dennis, our programmer, put them out on our website. Usually he gets them out there within 48 hours. I can certainly try to email them to anyone out there who might want them. Sometimes I find that the presentation is too large to send in an email, but I'm definitely willing to try. If anybody wants a copy in-house of the presentation, then by all means, just shoot me an email. You all have my address at ellie.harding@cu-northwest.com, and I'd be happy to get those for you. So now what we'll do, we'll go ahead and move on now to the next section, which the major components now that are involved in the business continuity plan. First of all, we have the core, and these are listed in the order of priority. And the core ensures the CU-based goal connectivity and the CU-based data integrity. Next, we have the third-party communication lines, and what we're looking that there is connectivity as well as the successful transfer of data. Then we have the third-party member-facing applications, and as you see listed on the screen, these are the It's Me 247, your audio response, your iPay, CUA imaging, as well as eDoc, and then the mobile banking. So then we have our third-party processing vendors like iPay, your share draft vendors, Catalyst, eDoc, Federal Reserve. And then we want to look at the goals of our business continuity. And so number one, obviously, is going to be to protect human life, protect and safeguard human life. We want to mitigate negative effects of disrupting the business operations. We strive to minimize loss of assets, revenues, and clients. And as always, we want to satisfy those regulatory and legal requirements that are set out by NCUA, FFEIC, etc. We strive to minimize confusion and enable effective decisions during any crisis. We facilitate and ensure the timely recovery of critical business functions. And then, of course, maintain the public image, reputation, and survival of the organization. Okay, so why is business continuity planning important? Because things happen, you know, all shapes, sizes, some planned, some unplanned. And the level of the incident, of control of that incident can vary, and it depends on the circumstance. Our reputation at CU Northwest, as well as the reputation of our clients, our people out there in the credit unions, is on the line. So whether it be a positive or a negative, and this happens every day. And then prompt and clear communication is vital, as well as quick and effective response and recovery. So that gives us a general overview. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, we've explained the HADRBC terminology as well as the goals, and then the importance of the business continuity to tie it all together. So now what we want to do is look at the types of high availability tests, or the HA. Most of the CU Northwest credit unions are aware of this type, and it typically involves credit union participation. Credit unions volunteer to test connectivity by logging into Gold. Credit unions will verify data integrity of the member data through member inquiry or creating reports, and then we compare those reports against what was created prior to the test. Credit unions that are involved participating, they'll typically hot card an ATM, print a report, connect to QSpy, view a check, view a receipt, log into It's Me 247, pull a credit report, and that ensures that all of those third-party vendor lines are in fact working. Then Site 4, our Site 4 operations, performs all of the daily processing steps and to test the connectivity to the third-party vendors such as your Federal Reserve and your share draft vendors. The full high availability test generally runs for 2 to 3 days. And while it is live, while you're actually out there performing your functions and taking care of your members, all credit unions are actually involved. What we get from our volunteer credit unions is the testing of the connectivity. Next, we have the limited high availability test, and that's performed to allow maintenance or hardware, software upgrades to be performed on our primary production server. So this is typically short in duration, and it does not require any credit union testing. Then we have our third-party switch or communication line testing. Site 4 operation configures backup recovery VPN switches for each of those communication lines that they maintain, and then tests are run on new DR VPN connections to ensure that they perform as required. And then tests are run periodically throughout the year as changes are being made. So when the tests are run on a DR VPN to a communication line, the primary communication subsystem is ended, then the physical VPN router is disconnected, and the backup DR VPN is rolled by either the communication switch vendor or Site 4. All data transmissions are then routed through the backup connection. On these third-party switches, the switch time is a matter of minutes, and these typically run for about 24 hours. And again, no credit union participation is required. Behind the scenes, transactions are flowing through the DR, the disaster recovery switch, and being monitored by Site 4. So how often do we do these high availability tests? The full HA tests are performed 3 to 4 times a year. The limited ones are performed as needed. If there's maintenance requirements for replacing, repairing equipment, if there's software updates, new releases from IBM, for example, on the iSweep, system outages at Site 4, then our third-party communication line roles are performed as those are needed. So again, it would be to test changes maybe made to equipment, config changes to the routers, new disaster recovery switches, etc., that type of thing. The new third-party communication DR VPN connections are created with integration as we bring on new vendors. It's an evolving process. Site 4 operations looks at the communication lines that were previously tested, and then they select new ones to test the next run around. They're always looking at something new. So each rollover test we do, Site 4 is picking something new, so that we're not just reinventing the same wheel. So then what happens during the high availability test? First, the test date's announced, and that is announced usually by Kathy Green. She sends out an alert email bulletin to everyone, letting them know that we will be having this HA test on a specific date. And then she calls for volunteer credit unions, those who want to go through the process of testing, as I explained a little bit earlier, a few screens back. Then, a week prior to the rollover test, CU Answers programming and operations departments are notified. Communication line vendors are notified of the role swap. End of day and beginning of day backups are brought on site from the previous end of day, beginning of day run. Then our Site 4, CU Northwest, CU South, CU Answers staff, they'll join a conference call. The third-party communication lines are brought down. Production server is now swapped over to the HA server, to the high availability server. Subsystems are then started on that new production server, which was formerly the HA. CU Talk is started up for all parties. ISME 247 is started. Communication lines are either backhauled, which is where a communication line gets data to a point where it can be distributed over a network backbone. Some of that technical jargon I promised I wasn't going to say. Or it's moved to their backup disaster recovery VPN lines. Then the third-party connections and subsystems are verified. Group provider personnel and volunteer credit unions begin their testing. At the conclusion of the testing, these steps are repeated then to swap the roles of the primary and the HA servers to what they were originally. So they're switched back over. Rollover procedures are the same as those initiated during a full HA test. However, no credit union testing is required on the limited high availability test. In the event of an actual disaster, all communication lines that have associated disaster recovery VPN backups would be rolled to them. All lines without a backup would be backhauled, which again is where a communication line gets data to a point where it can be distributed over a network. So then our communication line disaster recovery test, and this is a test of the third-party switches. The primary subsystem of the communication line is being tested is stopped. The primary physical router is then disconnected. The communication line is now pointed to the disaster recovery VPN router, either by the communication line vendor or by Site 4 operations, and then the subsystem is started. Data transmission is monitored and verified, and at the conclusion of this role test, the primary subsystem is stopped. The disaster recovery VPN router is physically then disconnected, and the communication line is pointed back to the primary router, either by communication line vendor or again by Site 4 operations, and the subsystem is started again. So then data transmission one more time is monitored and verified back on the original VPN. So then back to credit union participation. What are they testing? They're looking at gold connectivity, the data integrity. They look at ISME 247, the audio banking and the mobile banking features to make sure of connection. They look at their third-party connectivity. Is their CU Answers imaging and eDoc functioning? Their EFT vendors, can they view reports in QSpy? Can they pull credit reports? The ATM debit or credit card maintenance. Are the changes getting to your switch vendor? They look at printing capabilities, downloading files to their PC through the iSeries, and shared branching. And then all of this data, all of the testing that is done by operations, the programmers, and the credit unions are compiled into what's called a gap analysis. And that's produced after the rollover test. details any issues that were encountered, and then addresses how these particular issues were corrected. It helps evaluate what improvements can be made during the next test. Were any issues that you had during the test corrected? Why did they occur? Do you understand what was tested? It produces a report which is also available on our website in the same location as our business continuity plan. And so now, are there any questions from anyone? Okay, if I have no questions, as always, you know, if you think of something, feel free to email me directly. It has been great having all of you here today. We thank you for joining us this morning, and we look forward to your participation in our future educational department webinar presentations. Everyone have a great day. Thank you.
You too. Bye.